Alcatraz, an uninhabited island in San Francisco Bay, was originally intended for the defense of San Francisco when it passed from Spanish to American hands in 1848. With the civil wars that followed, some rebels were placed here and started to be imprisoned. But the climax of the island as a prison would be in the 1930s, about 100 years later, when it was strengthened and new buildings were added. Of course, one of the biggest factors that made the island popular would be the prisoners lying in it. And when some of these prisoners were names like Al Capone and Mickey Cohen, Alcatraz hospitality had become increasingly popular in those years. It was one of the world's highest security prisons, surrounded by the cold and wavy waters of the Pacific. Although there were many escape attempts in the 30s until the 60s, but almost all of those who tried to escape were caught. But even if there were those who survived the capture, they died either by freezing or drowning in the cold waters of this bay. In the 60s, the three men I will talk about in a moment overturned all these past experiences and carried out one of the most popular escape attempts spoken about in the world. First of all, our protagonist, Frank Morris, who is known to have a very high IQ and is even said to be in the 2% of the world in terms of IQ. After being convicted of theft crimes such as bank robbery and repeatedly attempting to escape in various prisons, in January 1960, his path fell to Alcatraz, where no one had ever managed to escape before. Frank was abandoned by his family when he was 11 years old, and then opened the prison doors at the age of 13 for the crimes he committed. In addition to being an experienced thief, he had been in and out of correctional institutions and prisons many times for armed robberies and illegal substance trafficking. His last stop was Alcatraz, where he was serving a 10-year sentence for bank robbery. Frank's teammates, brothers John and Clarence Anglin, came from a family of agricultural laborers. They committed their first offense when they were only 14 years old, and with the passing years, they started bank robberies. They were last caught in Alabama, and after being sentenced to 35 years in prison, they were transferred to Alcatraz in 1960 and 61, 1 year apart, after repeated attempts to escape from the Atlanta prison, saying, "We will look for a friend and go back in." The last member of the group, Alan West, was a thief from New York. He too was arrested more than 20 times until he started his adventure in Atlanta prison. And when he was caught stealing a car, he was first in Atlanta prison. But like the others, he traveled to several prisons and was defeated to escape from each of them. And his final end was Alcatraz in 1957. Each of these members were in their 30s, and as luck would have it, their cells were next to each other. And as you can understand, they devoted their lives to crime and then to escaping from the prisons they were locked up in. So when four men who were old mates who had made so many escape attempts met in the same prison at the same time, their ultimate goal was not to play okay, but to somehow escape from the world-famous Alcatraz, which was said to be inescapable. In 1961, thinking of an escape plan under Frank's leadership, our guys started to collect everything they could find for 6 months by carrying out an R&D work in every part of the prison whenever they were free and available. They had spoons and forks from the cafeteria, unused saws broken in the workshops, and even a drill made from a broken vacuum cleaner, which was their own invention. So everything that could drill through the wall was usable equipment for them. The team started to enlarge the ventilation holes under the sinks in their cells with the tools they made themselves. They worked so systematically that they played an accordion they found during the prison's daily music hour, creating even more noise in an already noisy environment, and took turns to speed up the work of enlarging the ventilation holes with handmade drills. When the work was finished, they would somehow hide the hole in the wall, and then they would go on as if nothing had happened until the next working hours. When the hole in all four cells became large enough to pass through with the passing of time, the team reached the idle corridor, through which the pipes behind the cell walls passed. In these corridors, they climbed through the pipes to the empty floor at the top of the cell blocks and created a working area that they could call a workshop. In this workshop, they will start to make handmade inflatable boats that they will use in the escape. Contrary to what we see in the films, All of the Alcatraz inmates were aware of this escape plan, and such an environment was created that the other inmates started to help them in the supply of materials to see what would happen and whether the team could escape. When the team was working in their workshops upstairs and preparing their escape equipment, they made a sculptural mannequin of themselves using toilet paper, soap, toothpaste, and rubble dust, so that it would not be understood that they were not in their beds. That is, they had only the head part, and even the hair of the mannequins they made was supplied by the barber of the prison, another prisoner, and they obtained a very realistic appearance, and they could continue their work comfortably at night. The help from other inmates was not only limited to the hair provided by the barber, but they were also able to find more than 50 raincoats. And in order to turn these raincoats into a boat and a life jacket, they used an issue of the popular mechanics magazine with the theme of survival in nature, which they also found in the prison. And at the same time, they made other equipment with the tactics they saw there. From another magazine they had found, they had learned information such as finding a route at sea and the dangers of navigation. And this information, which they could find in the 60s and in such poverty, was worth gold for them. They melted and glued the raincoats and silicones they found from the prisoners with the help of the heat of the hot water pipes in the corridor behind the cell, and prepared their primitive, inflatable boats approximately 180 by 420 in size. The team, which had also made their oars from the waste wood they found, was now in a position to set off. Finally, they climbed the ventilation shaft from the side of the workshop to the roof and completed all the operations by unscrewing the screws of a propeller large enough for them to pass through. Of course, this preparation adventure, which I have told you easily, lasted 6 months, and many hardships were overcome. But in the end, everything was ready, and it was time to go. On the night of the 11th of June, 1962, the team put the last stage of the plan into practice. They placed the mannequin heads, which they had made with impossibilities, on their beds, and by placing pillows on the lower part of the duvet, they made the mannequin look like a full human being and passed into the back corridor through the hole they had made in the ventilation duct. But here, one of the members had a big problem. Allen had realized that the hole he had made in the air duct a few days before was too big and obvious, and he had shaped it a little more with cement and made the hole invisible. But on the night of the escape, when he removed the grill in front of the hole, he was faced with a big shock. He could not pass through the hole. Thanks to the successful dummies they made without being seen, the absence of the team was not noticed until the morning. In the morning, the guard thought that these three were lying in their beds until he hit the head of one of the dummies that did not respond to his voices, that is, what he thought was a prisoner, and knocked it back and broke it. But when he realized that this was not the case, the alarms immediately sounded and a large-scale search was started. 10 days of extensive searches in the air, sea, and land did not find any trace of these three. In June, Coast Guard teams found a shovel floating about 180 meters off the south coast of Angel Island. On the same day, a local fisherman found a wallet wrapped in a bag containing the names, addresses, and photographs of the Engle brothers' relatives and friends. In the following days, pieces of raincoat thought to belong to the team's boat were found close to the Golden Gate Bridge. And finally, in those days, in 2018 June, an extinguished handmade boat was found 4,550 meters off Alcatraz. Life jackets were found, which were the only things that could be found about the men until today. But unlike him, neither a body nor any other concrete clue was found. So much so that the FB and Alcatraz management made a statement stating that the team drowned despite the fact that they could not find any evidence that the men were dead, both to damage their image and because it was impossible to escape from the cold Pacific waters with an inflatable boat. But this was not a convincing explanation that the famous Alcatraz prison was very costly after this escape. Allen, who failed to escape due to his own mistake, signed an informant agreement with the FBI in which he would tell the whole plan in exchange for not increasing his punishment. Apart from the part of the plan I have told you, the team's goal in the ongoing process was to continue their escape by stealing a car after landing, so that a little after the incident, there was a report of a stolen car with 3 men in it on Angel Island. But that vehicle was never found, and the FBI never added this report to its file. Did they die? In 1962, various members of the Engin family received anonymous postcards. At Christmas the following year, his brother's mother found a postcard in the mailbox with the words, "Merry Christmas to our mother, John McLaren," which made everything clearer. And over the years, family members received postcards, sometimes with names, sometimes without names. Of course, since Frank's family did not exist yet, what happened to him remained a complete mystery. Until 2013, it was thought to be so. But as I said, Engin Brothers' mother had received anonymous flowers and cards every Christmas on Mother's Day until her death in 1973. In fact, when the mother died in 1973, according to the family members, 2 women who were too big and tall for a woman wearing heavy makeup, whom no one knew, attended the funeral, waited for a while, and then left. Years after this incident, in 1989, when the father of the family died, 2 people with beards and glasses, whom no one knew, attended the funeral. They attended the funeral, waited for 5 minutes in front of the funeral, and left crying. And even though there was such strong evidence that the men were not dead, the FBI never went back on their word. They could neither find these 3 men nor any evidence of them. There were only postcards and 2 mysterious people who attended the funerals. Anyway, this file full of mysteries was closed by the FBI in 1979 and given to the police force, and although the prisoners were declared dead, the search for the Engin brothers continued for years. In 2010, on his deathbed, he confessed that he had been in contact with his fellow fugitives from 1963 until about 1990. In 2018, in a very interesting way, another fact was revealed in the file of these fugitives. In 2013, the FBI confirmed that the San Francisco Police Department had received a letter written by John Anglin. In the letter, "My name is John Anglin. In June 1962, together with my brothers Clarence and Frank Morris, we escaped from Alcatraz, no matter how much you may not believe it. Frank from our group died in 2008 in Alexandria, Egypt, and was buried under a different name, and my brother Clarence died of cancer. 3 years ago, I am 83 years old, and I have cancer. Like my brother, I'm in a bad condition. I would like to come and surrender and tell everything if you will pay for my treatment on TV." But the FBI confirmed the arrival of this letter in 2018, 5 years after the incident was revealed, but never made such a promise on television and never made a call. This was the story of 3 legendary men who managed to escape from the Alcatraz prison, which today serves as a museum. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe and like.